Hello everyone and welcome to AGACAD's webinar Complex Connections for Timber and Steel Frames in Revit. Before I start, I want to make sure that everyone can hear me and can see my screen, so please raise your hands. You can do that in the GoToWebinar dialog on the right side of your monitor. Thank you for raising your hands. As I understand, you can hear me and can see my screen. If you will have any questions, you can write them down in the GoToWebinar dialog under questions, and in the end of the webinar, I will try to answer them. And now I can introduce myself. My name is Eve and I am an architect and a BIM consultant at AGACAD. Our mission is building BIM together, which means that we align our clients' needs and develop solutions for continuous BIM acceleration. Our promise to clients is reducing BIM stress. We help to eliminate tasks that do not create value. And what is this webinar about? So you'll see how to auto-generate multi-layer wall, floor, and roof framing using custom rules and templates. Also, you'll see how to distribute joint connections and other details using your own configurations with wood and metal framing software and also with smart details. So you'll see how to define rules and insert hundreds of elements into the project with a few clicks. And of course, easily prepare shop drawings and cut lists of your elements. And I already have some projects opened in my Revit. So let's just jump right into the demonstration. And you can see, first of all, that right here I have a project where I have a couple of walls empty and all walls are framed. And I'm sure a lot of you already know about the framing tools, but in case some of you don't, I just want to mention that all of these frames are created with the wood framing software. Also, we have the same tool for metal framing software, and I can just create my own configurations, how these structural framing elements are distributed in these layers of the wall. I can map my configurations to certain layers, and all of these elements are distributed automatically. So for example, now I can just select these two walls. I can click on frame wall command, and now the framing tool is distributing framing elements in my walls. And later I will also be able to add structural connections, so details, into this model using the wood framing software. And also the same applies to the metal framing software, and you'll see examples of metal frames in this webinar as well. Yeah, okay, and my walls are framed and all the structural framing elements are distributed in the main frame layer. Also, you can see the header is here, the main studs, the bridging, bottom plate, top plate, and so on. All of these elements by the configuration that I created. And now I'm ready to insert the details. So first of all, I'll show you how we can insert details with the framing tools. So now I will open the details window, and right here in the details configurations, I can create configurations for the details. I can save them by my own name and use them in the future projects. These configurations can be placed also on a shared location like the framing configurations, so your colleagues have an access to them. So again, they can be created only one time and then used in the future. And right here for this configuration that I will add to my frames, we can take a look at what I'm adding. So for the bridging, blocking, and plate, I'm adding the anchors to the bottom plate, to the top face of the bottom plate, as you can see by this rule. Also, I'm adding clip angles to the top face of the header and the bottom face of the sill. Also, the top face of the bottom plate and bottom face of the top plates. So these are the rules that I'm using to add my details, and all these rules are saved under this name configuration. And now I can just use add details, click on any element from the frame choose the configuration for the details that I want to use, and add the details. So now I'm adding them by the frame configuration, and you'll see those anchors will be added, also the clip angles and so on. Yeah, and you can see that the details are added by the configuration. These anchors on the bottom plate, these angles on the top plate, on the sill plate, and on the bridging, and so on. And now we can take a look at other examples. So first of all, I will open an example with metal wall framing. As I mentioned, we have the same software for creating metal frames and floor frames and roof frames as well. And right here, you can see that these angles are added together with the framing software, and you can see that these bolts are actually different detail. This is not one detail, this is different, this is a separate one. So for example, we can add only this angle connector without the bolts, and we would reach a lower LED level if you don't need this much detail. So you can just play around it as you like with this tool. For example, I can turn on the details and modify the details. Yeah, and you can see that I'm adding an angle with them, and I can just very easily, for example, remove some of the details that I'm adding, and I will reach a lower LED level. Okay, and now let's open another example. Again, metal wall, but this time it's with Simpson details, with the Simpson clips, and also with Dietrich details for the headers. So you can see this is one type and this is another type, and again all of those are added with the framing software. And we can move on to another example, and this is again wood framing walls with Simpson details. So all of these frames are created with the framing software. So for example, here you can see that both of these walls are framed using the same configuration, but this one I'm using different configurations for the wall in the first floor and the wall in the second or the last floor. So if I would open the details menu and let's say modify these details on the second floor, I can save the configuration, I can take it, yeah, and now I can delete the details, so we would see only the details from the first floor, and as you can see, it doesn't have those Simpson strap ties that were added right here. So I can just use add details, yeah, the configuration for the last floor, not the first one. I can add them, and you'll see how these details are added using functionality from the framing software. And I have another example with external hangers and with the internal hangers, and another one again with the internal hangers and the hold down hangers. So also what I would like to mention is that it's very important how the details are created by the manufacturer, because we don't actually know whether it, for example, this detail is added on the top face of the bottom plate or on the right side of the stud, let's say. So always we have to examine the detail and we have to understand how it's created. For example, this detail, it's created and it will be added on the stud and not on the plate, as we can see from how it's created, because it's important to understand that in order to create a correct configuration for these details. And these ones are created again differently. So it's important how the details are created by the manufacturer, where the insertion point is and on which face it's created and so on. And again, this was wood framing with Simpson details. And let's move on to another example. And this is the example with metal floor frame and again angle details. And as you can see right here, it's adding one type details to the connection with the joist and a header, and a different sized detail in the connection with the rim joist and the main joist. And in this place also it's adding a different size connection. So it all depends on our configuration. Okay, now we can take a look at another example with the wood floor. So, as I mentioned, these frames are created with the framing software as well as the details are added with one. So we can just very quickly try and frame our floor. So now all the structural framing elements will be added into this floor. And now we can also add the details. So I can open the details window again, and I can, first of all, I can take this configuration if I want to add the same. So I can just modify these details, again these Simpson details, save it, and add them to this floor, add details, and that's it. And also details can be added together with the frame command when I was framing the floors or walls, but we actually recommend to add them at the very end, at the last stages of your project, in order to save time on updates and so on. So you can just create the frame, you can modify it if you need to, and then you can add the details. And again, for this location, these hangers were added, and in the connection for the joist and the bridging, a different detail was added. It all depends on our configuration. Again, another example is for the roof. So we can frame not only walls and floors but also roofs. So this frame was created by Roof Panel Frame for the metal roof, and also the details were added with the framing software. Again, different details for these connections and different connections. We can create a lot of different configurations for our details. And these were examples that you just saw how you can add, how you can distribute details together with the framing software. But if you have more complex situation, that's when you'll need to use smart details. So for that, I will open another project in which I will distribute the details using Smart Details tool. Okay, this is it, and you can see a floor that's frame is quite complex, and actually I hosted a separate webinar dedicated to complex floor framing, and I framed this floor during that webinar. So again, this frame is created completely automatically using our framing software, and also these wooden and metal details are added also with Smart Details tool with our software. So you can just take a look at that webinar if you're interested how this floor is framed and how the details are configured. But now I will add only these details to this floor, so you can see they're added right here, but this floor is only framed, it's without the details. And also you can see that this metal beam right here, it does not cut an opening in my joist, and here it is, so that means it's added with the Smart Details. So now I'm gonna need my Smart Details tool, so there it is. Yeah, and Smart Details can insert and can instantly add any number of phase-specific intelligent details which adapt to host element changes throughout your models. So you can easily set up rules to insert or adjust details based on gravity point, depth, and more. Structural engineers save many hours per project by using Smart Details. So now I want to show you another thing that for this wall, for example, for this floor, you can see that I have a lot of different element types. For example, this is a I-joist, this is a plate rim joist. These are different elements and I want to add different details on these elements. Also, one type of details should be added in this connection and another detail should be added right here. And all of these configurations can be written into the element. So, for example, let's take a look right now at the Smart Details tool. So right here I have my configuration, and with these commands I can insert details. I can insert them automatically by the configuration that is written into the element's type properties. I can update them anytime. And so on. So right here you can see my configurations, and I can even add details not only on structural framing elements as I'm showing you, as I'm demonstrating you right now, but also on other elements like, for example, walls. So now if I would turn on walls category, we can also see some examples how these details are added by a certain rule. So let's say I would turn on point-based details on side face. And right now I can just check out these rules. So searching rule class is, for example, top and bottom virtual intersection. And if you're not sure what that means, you can just turn it on and instantly you'll see a symbolic rule preview right here. You can see how the details are added using this rule, and of course you can make a certain judgment what rule do you need to use. Let's take a look at another one, and right here you can see a ventilated facade, and all these details were added using Smart Details, and actually I will show you this example during this webinar. Another rule, again, how these details are distributed on T and B connections, and L and R connections, again on the wall, no structural framing. These are on wall joints, so it's very simple, as you can see, where the wall joints, where we can see a T connection, end connection, L connection, the details are added on the connections. And top and bottom element faces. Yes, so you can see all these previews right here. And also if we have more and more configurations, it becomes difficult to use them. So that's why we added configuration groups. So then each time you create a configuration, you can not only save it and use it in the future, but you can also add it to groups. So for example, when I create a certain configuration, I'm saying that I want to add it to the walls group and so on. And then I can filter them easily. And right here again, you can see a lot of great examples how you can use Smart Details, and some of them I will show you during this presentation. So again, these configurations can be saved and used in the future, and you can add details by a lot of different rules, like point based on end faces, point based on top and bottom faces, line based on side faces, and so on. So again, as I mentioned when I showed you those Simpson details, it's important to understand how the detail family is created in order to create the configuration correctly, in order for you to understand whether you should put it on a side face or on end face or maybe on top and bottom face. It's not always easy to understand, but it's much easier when you check out how the detail family is created, because as I mentioned, different manufacturers create them differently. Yeah, so we have those configurations, and again, maybe I will turn them on and show you that right now I'm going to add details on structural framing elements on my framed floors. So now you can see that I have a couple of different configurations. So actually I can choose a configuration, I can copy the name of the configuration. And as I mentioned, I want to add different details and different elements. So in the elements type properties, I can write the configuration name. And then when I will select all elements and use auto insert, the tool will automatically insert different details on different elements, because it will read the configuration name from the elements type properties. So you can see that for this I-joist, I'm using this detail configuration. But for this element, I'm using a completely different configuration. Yeah, so that saves us time when we don't need to select these elements, then those, and so on. So now I can just take my framing tool, because it's much easier to select all these elements, and I will select all frame elements. Select any element from the frame, and it selected all of them, and I will actually deselect a couple because I will need to add those details by a different configuration on these elements. Okay, I deselect these ones, and I'm not sure about that one, but we can anytime delete the detail if we don't need it. Okay, and now when all elements are selected, as we mentioned, I can just use auto insert, and now the tool is reading the configuration that is written into the element's type properties and distributing details by that configuration. Yeah, now you can see that it's inserting details for 23 elements, now for 63 elements, because it found two groups of elements. One group was 23 elements, second one is 63. So you can imagine that I have almost 100 elements, and each element has up to 4 details inserted. Maybe some of them have even more. So that's a lot of details to insert manually, but automatically, as you can see with smart details, it's very fast and time efficient. And you will see how the details are added. And as I mentioned, if you're interested how to create a complex floor frame like this, I hosted a separate webinar about how to frame this floor and how to add details on it as well. So you can just go ahead and check out that webinar if you're interested how this wall was framed. Yes, and you can see that Smart Details is almost done. And we can just, if we make any changes anytime, we can update the details as I mentioned, so it's very time efficient. Okay. And we can see that the details are added. So, one type of detail was added. For example, for this I-joist, I have a support plate and I have this metal detail, and for this element I have only the metal detail. So for example, this element, how many details does it have? As you can see, it has 2 plates on each side, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 even, and an opening also. So a lot of different details. Yeah, and I have metal details, I have wooden details, and all of them together with the framing elements can be exported to CNC machines as well. And I have this lumber detail, wooden plate details. Right here I also have completely different configuration for the details. Right here again it's different. So all of those detail configurations were read from the element's type properties. And yeah, as I mentioned, I probably didn't need this one, it's not correct, so I can just anytime delete the selected detail, and that's it. And now it will be better. So now what I will do, I will use a different configuration for this I-joist that I have left. So I'll select these, and this time I will use insert details, and I will choose a different configuration without the lumber elements, because for these elements I want to insert only the wood plates. As you can see, these joists are not as high as these, they're lower, so I will need to add those lumber details, those long lumber details on top of these additional support elements right here instead of the main joists. So that's why I will use 2 different configurations, one for these elements and another one for the additional support elements, and that is how I will add the details. So you'll see plates appearing right here and also right here, and the opening for the metal beam will be cut also. And as I mentioned, don't forget to write questions if you have any, and in the end of the webinar I will try to answer them. Okay, and you can see that the plates are added on both sides, and the opening is cut for the metal beam, and it's also added with the framing software. And now what is left are the lumber elements. So I will select these additional support elements, and again I will use insert details, and this time I will only add the floor lumber, and this is the group that I mentioned. So we can, if we have a lot of configurations, it becomes difficult to choose, so we can just assign it to the groups. But now I have not done that. Okay, now it will insert only these lumber elements. Yeah, and that's it. And the floor is framed and the details are added automatically, and anytime we can update them if any changes are made, and as I mentioned, we can even export these wooden details to CNC machines. Okay, and now let's take a look at more examples. So I will actually open the project that I already showed you with the Simpson details, because in that project I also added sheeting nailing with the Smart Details command. So for that I will turn on the parts visibility, and right here you can see that I created rules with the Smart Details tool. So for example, we can take a look how they're created. So I'm just adding point-based details on the side face of the element. So yeah, that's pretty clear. This is a side face of the part, and these are the point-based details, and I'm arraying them by two rules. So these two elements to one side and these two elements to another side, and that is the rule that I'm using. Okay, and let's take a look at more examples. So I will open another project. Yeah, wrong project, sorry. I will find another one, this one. So for example, in this project, you can see that a mixed frame is created again with our framing tools. This is a new technology that we adapted to the wood framing tools, where you can also add metal frame hollow studs, and on these studs, of course, we also need details added, and these details are added with the Smart Details tool. And for example, if I would isolate these elements together with the details, you would see that it also recognizes whether it's a stud added on the side of the frame or on the center, and it's adding different details. So if I would isolate the element, you would see that this kind of detail is added on the side, this kind of detail is added on the center, hollow stud, and so on. And it's cutting the wood frame like this. And now what I can also do is I can show you another example. And this is an example with the kickers. So again, you can see that these elements, for example, they were added on top of the top plate, I guess. Yeah, you can see. If I would modify these details, yeah, you can see that they were added on the top face. This is the top face of the plate. Yeah, and it's connecting. We can also see in the modified details that it searches the floors, and that is why they're connected to this floor. So all of that is automatical. We didn't need to connect them. And these are similar ones, but they're added not on the top face of the wall, but on the side of the metal stud. Yeah, for example, you can see that right now I'm adding them not on the top face, but on the side face. So it all depends how the details should be added and how they are created. Okay. And now we can look at another example. I have so many projects that I'm having difficulties finding the correct one. Yeah, this one. Okay, and right here in this example, you can see a ventilated facade, and you can see that I added details using separate rules. So one rule was used for these details, and another rule was used for distributing these ones on the perimeter of the floor. So for example, here I can again modify this detail and I can see how it's added. So it's added on the side face, floor perimeter, and you can even see this image example on the preview. And this is the spacing, the distance, and so on, how the detail is added. And this is a large project with a lot of details, so imagine how much time it would take to actually add them all manually. And if changes are made, then it gets even more difficult and even more time consuming. We can also take a look at another project. Okay. And this is an example with ceiling. So you can see that the parts were split for the ceiling, also the frames were added using the framing software, and finally the details were added on the side face of this joist for stronger support. And these details were also added by a separate rule, and they are connecting the ceiling and this detail automatically. It's searching for virtual intersection. If it sees the virtual intersection, it's adding the detail. And finally, another example, okay, is for the roof. So you can see that right here a rafter roof is framed and wooden details are added where the joist and where the girder intersects right here, and also where the I-joist meets the ridge beam. Separate details are added, and on all other situations they're all added manually. And we can also export them to CNC machines. So all of this is done using the Smart Details software. Now, for example, this is how many rules were used to add all those details in all those different situations. For example, this is the rafter connection plate, Hunton girder connection, bottom connection, and so on. Yes, so now I encourage you to download a free trial of these tools and try them out yourself. So you can just go ahead and go to agacad.com, download the tools for BIM doc. And yeah, you will just choose a version, download the doc, and from there you can get any trial of our tools. So I recommend to download Smart Details, or if you don't have framing software, of course, download the trial for the framing software as well, and just try the tool out for yourself. And thank you for those of you who attended this webinar. I hope it was beneficial for you and that you found out something new, and I hope to meet you in my future webinars. Have a nice day or a nice evening, and I hope to see you and to meet you in the future. Goodbye, everyone.
AGACAD, building BIM together.